Hi guys, it's Beth. Welcome back to my channel, and today I wanted to share another project that I've been working on from my Pinkaboo pad. This time I've made a little mini album, and it's actually just made from cardstock. I have discovered that I like to make mini albums out of things that I have on hand. So whether that's envelopes or paper bags or cardstock or whatever, chipboard. Sometimes I've just used some chipboard out of my stash to use it up. But I like to just make them from things I have. And so I think a year or two ago, I made some 6x6 mini albums for an order. I had an order of 10 of them. And so I had a whole bunch of white cardstock pieces left that are... They're 5 inches wide by about 8 inches long. And so they were just what was left from when I cut down I think I used 8.5 by 11 cardstock. And so this is what was left after I cut my cardstock down to make those 6x6 mini albums. So I held on to these because it's nice heavyweight cardstock, and I figured that I could do something with these in the future. When I wasn't originally going to make a mini album from the Pinkaboo pad, but there were a bunch of like journal card cut-aparts in the cut-apart pages, and so I decided to go ahead and make a small mini album just to kind of help use those up. And so I was trying to figure out how I wanted to make it, what I wanted to make it with. I still had some of those craft like 6x6 envelopes left, and then I have some off-white ones, which neither one of those colors worked great for the colors in this pad. And so I could have done some like bigger, like taller envelope albums, but just the size of the cut-aparts that I didn't feel like that was going to work. So I was just looking through my stash of album possibilities to see what I might have, and I ran across these, and I thought, okay, like how can I use these? So I'm going to do a flip through of the album that I've already made, and then I'm going to make another one with you on camera. And I'm not sharing this with you so that you feel like you have to make the exact same size. I'm just trying to show you different ways that you can use things in your stash to make mini album. You don't have to go out and buy paper bags or envelopes or make an elaborate album. Like you can truly make an envelope or a mini album out of pretty much anything that you already have on hand, and it doesn't have to be hard or time consuming or elaborate. Anyway, now that I've said my spiel, my album ended up being 6x5, so not quite square. And on the cover here, I wanted to reinforce it a little bit more. So I have a layer of pink cardstock. There's a strip of purple, it was like a cut-apart strip from the pad. Some gold foil cardstock, and then there's this cut-apart here. It was like a journal card cut-apart, and then the skull with the flowers. And then this Trick or Treat Yosef is, I had fussy cut it out of the pumpkins. I don't know if you saw my last video where I had fussy cut out a pumpkin that I added to my decorative blocks. And this was like one of the words that was in a circle around that pumpkin. And so I also salvaged those and fussy cut out all those phrases. So I decided to use that one on the front here. So then when you open it up, you'll see when I show you how I'm making it, I scored, just so I could get 6.5 inches in length, I scored my paper and then used that to bind my pages together and also create a pocket. So this is a 5x6 inch page, and then here is the other half of, this was like one of those 12x12 page images, and I thought they were cute. So I just used those as, one on each side. Added some paper here to cover my flaps, and then created a little tag to stick inside the pocket. And I just used some of the pattern paper and a cut-apart. And then I also created some pockets on some of the internal pages. And then just used, this was another cut-apart, so I just created a tag with it, added some ribbon. And then for this set of pages, I picked some skulls. There was a lot of skulls in this pad, a lot of skulls. So I just used some of the skulls for the page backgrounds. And I didn't really embellish the pages very much just because there's not a whole lot of room. I wanted room for pictures. And then on the inside of this pocket, I took a journal card and folded it in half, which is kind of weird. It felt weird to do, but that way they can journal on the whole, you know, the whole circle inside the journal card, and it just wasn't wide enough. I couldn't, there was no way I could have trimmed it down so that it would fit inside this pocket, so I just folded it. And then I created another tag on the inside of this pocket, and this was a 6x6 cut apart, and so it was like a big 6x6 journal card. And so I just trimmed it down, left some of the pumpkins showing, and left the notes on there. And again, just tied in some white ribbon on the end of this one. And I rounded the corners on this one so it matched the purple one. And then this set of pages is spiders, the pretty purple background with the spiders and the flowers. This was a scrap I had, and I just made sure I picked out parts of the scrap with the webbing. And then this one's really pretty. It's got like an ombre look to the background and then a gold foil web. And so I did decorate this page. I used a cut apart because of the spider, but then I left it up so that a picture can tuck behind it. And then there was a spider journal card. It was actually bigger, and I just fussy cut around the edge so that it would fit inside this pocket. And then the back I kept simple and just used some more of the skulls. And then I did cover up the binding with a border cut apart just to kind of finish it off. So it was pretty simple. It went together pretty quickly once I figured out the design that I wanted to use. And again, just trying to use up something in my stash that I could make a mini album out of. So I will switch over to a voiceover at this point and kind of go through my process with you. So I actually scored my paper at 2.5 inches from the one side, and that's what I'm trying to show you here. I think in when I was flipping through, I said that the pages were 6.5 by 5, but they're 6 by 5, and then these little flaps are 2.5 by 5. So I have already pre-scored all of these to speed things up, and now I'm just using my bone folder to get those burnished down really well, and now I can start the assembly. So I'm showing you here that I'm taking the 2 small flaps, and I'm going to glue those together for this set of pages. And I'm using my art glitter glue for this. And throughout this process, I go back and forth between art glitter glue and score tape, just depending on what it is I'm gluing down. If I'm making pockets, I'm for sure using the art glitter glue, and then otherwise, if it's a smaller space, I'm also using the art glitter glue. So that is one set of pages. Now for this next set of pages, I'm going to glue the big sides together. So this will be the big pocket page. So I'm just making sure that it's lined up really well, and that's another reason why wet glue works really well here, is so that I can make sure everything's lined up nice and evenly. And then I use my bone folder to go through and kind of just make sure that the glue is flattened out and that it's going to hold. And I'm just showing you that there are some pockets. So here again is another short side. Just adding my glue on 3 sides so that the top section will be open for a pocket. So this really goes together fairly quickly. You do the short sides together, and the next page you do the long sides together. And I ended up doing 5 pages, I think. You can do as many pages as you want, and you can use different size. Like I said before, I think I'm not saying that you have to take paper and cut it down to this size. These were scraps that I had left. I'm just, again, trying to remind you that you can make a mini album with whatever materials you have on hand almost. So Now I'm ready for the last page and am finishing by gluing the short sides together. And then that back page will be, that last page then will be my back cover. And that's all there was to the assembly of the album. And now the fun part is decorating. So there are 2 long pockets and 3 small pockets. So I have all my pieces already pre-cut. Whenever I made that first album, I went ahead and just cut 2 sets of everything just to make this process go a little smoother. And here I'm jumping over to score tape to add the cardstock to the front of my album. And just because it's a bigger space and I didn't want to have to wait for dry time, so I'm lining it up with the cardstock up with the outside of the front cover. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the paper that's going on the back cover. And then I will come in and fill that space, like the white space on the spine, with the pattern paper, like the spider web border strip that I use to cover my binding. So here I just peeled off the tape that's going to be on that left-hand side, make sure I get it lined up before the whole thing would stick down. And now I'm coming back in to finish peeling. So now in order to do my spine, I'm just kind of making sure how I want it to line up. So for this first part, I'm going to use my art glitter glue. 1, because the space isn't wide enough for score tape, and 2, I just wanted a good hold and make sure that it was going to be flush up against my pink cardstock. And then I'm going to burnish it down really good. And while it's drying, I'm going to come trim the top off with my finger blade and a cutting mat. And so now I'm going to kind of fold it over and burnish the top just to help it fold cleanly. And then on the back side, here I'm just making sure that it's good, everything's going to open okay. So on the back side, I do use score tape because I want a quick hold since it's, I need it to, because it's folded and it's not laying flat, I need to make sure that that end is going to stay down once I put it down. So, and I didn't have to worry, this back part was wider and so the tape fit fine on that part. So now I'm just coming in with my finger blade again and trimming off any of the excess that hung over from that front and back cover. And then there's a little bit there giving me some trouble from that strip covering my spine. So now I can start decorating my front cover. So I'm taking this border strip piece that I had, and I'm just using some art glitter glue since it's a kind of a thin surface, and adding it to the front, burnishing it down, and then we'll trim off that overhang there. And now I'm going to go ahead and add score tape to the back of my cover pieces here, like the decorative pieces for my cover. And I will get those assembled before I put them onto my actual cover. So that's what I'm doing here, is I'm going to lay that journal card on that gold piece before I add it to my cover. Just for me, it's easier to make sure things are centered if I'm doing them together. And then I'm going to use our glitter glue again to add my little skull cut apart onto the journal card, making sure to get it centered there in that open square space. And then I have my title that I'm going to add to the top of the skull cut apart. Just kind of burnishing it all down. So now the front and back are done. And then I've sped this up a little bit faster just because assembling the pages is pretty self-explanatory. I did use score tape on the bigger pages and art glitter glue on the smaller pages. Again, just because of the amount of space that I would be adding glue to on the bigger pages, I chose to go with score tape. But on the smaller pages, I did go ahead and use art glitter glue since they were smaller. And I know I'm going to have to come back in and do some trimming. I have found that even though I've cut something to a specific size, if there are more than one, there are always some that are either bigger, like a 1/16 of an inch bigger, or smaller or longer or whatever than the actual size that I went to cut it to. It's like sometimes depending on where on that, 8-inch mark or whatever I had it. Did I have it to the inside of the mark, to the outside of the mark, right in the middle of the mark? So I tend to make my pages, if I'm trying to cover the whole album page with my pattern paper, I tend to make the pattern paper just a bit bigger than what it's supposed to be, just so I can make sure I cover any extra cardstock that's on there. I also do that when I make my cards. I don't often cover the whole card front with some pattern paper, but when I do, I tend to make it bigger because it never fails that card base that I made is slightly bigger. And so then I have to trim the whole card base down, and I ain't got time for that. So this process went pretty fast too. For me, the hardest part isn't the assembly, it's the designing. Trying to figure out, like, for this one, it was trying to figure out how I wanted to make the pages, and then picking out the patterns and the combinations of everything. But I love that web paper right there with the different colors and the gold webbing. So pretty. I do have to say, one of my issues with this pad is all of the skulls that they have. Like, it's called Pinkaboo, but there was really only one pattern that was ghosts. And I would have preferred more ghosts. I don't have an issue with skulls, but I know there are a lot of people that do. And at least they did try and pretty them up with, flowers and things like that. But still, I would have preferred some more ghosts. Or even bats, or cats. Anyway, so now I've sped this process up quite a bit too, just because I'm going through the whole album, trying to trim off all those overhangs with my finger blade. Getting the shorter pages as well as the longer pages. And so this album kind of got to work out with me bending it every which way, trying to make sure I got all the overhangs cut off. But I love the finger blade for things like this, because whenever I go in with even a small pair of sharp scissors, I can never get it right up to the edge, and the finger blade does an awesome job of that. Okay, so now the pages are done, and now I can go through and work on the decorating of the pages. So here I'm just using a 1-inch circle punch and punching a circle in the center of those smaller pages so that it's easier to get things in and out of the pockets, and just so that people would remember that it's a pocket. And I will say that that punch was being all it could be to cut through 2 layers of cardstock and 2 layers of pattern paper. So what you couldn't see in the sped up version were the little half circles flying through the air and hitting me in the face. I'm making the journal card that's going to go, or the little tag that's going to go in that first pocket. And so I just took another cut apart of a ghost and added a strip of blue paper onto that pink stripe paper. And then I'm going to turn it into a tag here by rounding the bottoms. And then I'm trying to show you that on my We Are Memory Keepers corner punch that or the corner chomper, I'm using the scalloped side. So now I'm making the tag that's going to go in that first bigger pocket page. I just took some ribbon and folded it over like 4 times, and then am wrapping the 2 loose ends, like making sure that they wrap all the way around that bunch there and tying them, and then that will secure them to the tag. And now I'm just trimming them up a little bit. So now it looks like a little tassel. For this one, this was the easiest one. All I had to do was take that journal card round the corners and fold it in half. And I had held it up to the other one just to make sure that I hadn't cut any extra off of it before I rounded the corners. This one, another easy one, just stick the spider tag in there. For this tag that's going in the end pocket again, I'm doing it a little bit differently. I'm taking some thin white ribbon and looping it through the hole at the top. And I'm looping it through a couple times just so that it gives it a little more oomph at the top, like it's wrapped around several times instead of just one thin time, and then just tying it in a simple knot on this one. Nothing fancy. And then just trim up my ends, and that one is good to go. For the spider here, I'm making sure that I only add glue to the outer and bottom edges of my circle so that it can be a little tuck spot. And then I'm just sitting my circle punch on there so that the glue can dry. And here is our quick little album. Now I may come back and add some scrap pieces to embellish it at the end, but this is how it is for now. So hopefully you guys got an idea of maybe what you could do with this paper, or how you can make mini albums of just things in your stash already. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I thank you guys so much for your time, and I hope you're all having a crafty day.